The alarm screamed through the bridge of the Indomitable. Red lights flashed across every surface as the massive human warship cut through the darkness of space. Captain Day One stood at the center of it all, his dark eyes fixed on the holographic display floating before him. The image showed a planet surrounded by hundreds of enemy ships, all of them firing down at a small station that orbited the world below. "Captain, we're receiving another distress call from Valorum Station," said Ensign Kyung, her hands shaking slightly as she worked the communications console. She was young, barely 23, and this was her first real mission. "They say the Tharine are preparing for a final assault. They're asking for immediate evacuation." Day One nodded slowly. He had heard the same message 6 times in the past hour. Each time the voices on the other end sounded more desperate, more afraid. 12,000 people lived on that station. 12,000 miners, engineers, doctors, teachers, and children. All of them were about to die. "What about the Coalition fleet?" asked Commander Jiwoo, stepping up beside the captain. She was a tall woman with sharp features and a mind that could calculate battle strategies faster than most computers. They were supposed to defend this sector. Lieutenant Hana looked up from her tactical station. "They retreated 3 hours ago, Commander. Lost too many ships. The Tharine outnumber them 5 to 1. She paused, biting her lip. "Command has ordered us to hold position at the jump point. We're not supposed to engage." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what those orders meant. The Coalition had given up. They had decided that Valorum Station couldn't be saved, that the cost was too high. It was the logical choice, the smart choice. Save the fleet, lose the station. Day One walked to the forward viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere ahead, beyond the swirling clouds of the nebula, people were dying. People who had done nothing wrong except live in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Tharine Collective didn't take prisoners. Everyone knew that. When they conquered a place, they killed everyone there. It was their way. "How long until the station's shields fail?" Day One asked quietly. Hana checked her screens. 2 hours, maybe less. Once the shields are down, the Tharine will send boarding parties. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Chief Engineer Minho's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, the ship is ready. All systems are green. We can jump whenever you give the order." There was a pause. "We can also fight if that's what you're thinking." Day One smiled slightly. Minho always knew what he was thinking. The engineer had been with him for 10 years, through 3 different ships and more battles than either of them liked to remember. "Captain," Jiwoo said carefully, "if we go in there, we might not come back. 1 ship against their entire fleet. The odds are impossible." "I know," Day One replied. "Command will court-martial you for disobeying orders. I know. We could die. All of us. I know." Day One turned to face his crew. Every person on the bridge was looking at him now, waiting. "But there are 12,000 people on that station who will definitely die if we do nothing. The Coalition gave up on them. Command gave up on them. Maybe that's the smart play. Maybe that's the logical thing to do." He walked back to his command chair and sat down. "But we're human. We don't leave people behind. Not when we can do something about it." The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Hana spoke up. "The Tharine won't expect us. Our weapons are different from Coalition tech. We might surprise them. Our shields can take more punishment too," added Minho over the intercom. "Human engineering is stubborn. Like us." Kyung looked up from her console, fear and determination mixing on her young face. "I'll send a message to the station. Let them know help is coming." Jiwoo sighed, but she was smiling. "Well, if we're going to do something crazy, we might as well do it properly. I'll plot the best approach vector." Day One felt a surge of pride. This was his crew. These were his people. "All hands, this is the captain. Battle stations. We're going into the combat zone." The Indomitable turned and accelerated. The ship was massive, nearly 1 kilometer long, bristling with railguns and missile tubes. It had been built by human hands using human designs, and it was tougher than anything else in the sector, but it was still just 1 ship. As they approached the nebula, the first contacts appeared on the sensors. Tharine scout ships, small and fast, patrolling the outer edges of the combat zone. There were 6 of them, spread out in a loose formation. "They've detected us," Hana reported. "They're moving to intercept." "Let them come," Day One said calmly. "Charge the forward railguns. Target the lead ship." The Tharine scouts came in fast, their weapons glowing with blue energy. They were used to Coalition ships, which would normally try to avoid fighting and call for backup. But the Indomitable didn't slow down. Instead, it charged straight at them. Firing, Hana said. The railgun spoke with a sound like thunder. Solid metal slugs, each one weighing several tons, shot out at incredible speed. The lead Therine scout never had a chance. Its shields flickered once, then failed completely as the slug punched through its hull. The ship exploded in a ball of fire. The other scouts scattered, confused. They had never seen weapons like this before. Energy shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not solid metal moving at a fraction of light speed. Target 2 destroyed, Hana reported, her voice steady. 3, 4, 5. All contacts eliminated. 1 escaped, Jiwoo noted, watching her tactical display. It's running back to the main fleet. Good, Daewon said. Let it tell them we're coming. I want them to know. He looked at Kyung. Send a message to Valorum Station. Tell them the Indomitable has arrived. Tell them to hold on. The ship dove into the combat zone, leaving the wreckage of the scouts behind. Ahead, hundreds of enemy vessels waited. Behind, there was only darkness and the distant stars of home. The crew of the Indomitable knew they might not survive this. But they also knew they had to try. Because that's what humans did. When someone needed help, when someone was in danger, humans answered the call, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. The warship descended deeper into the swirling chaos of battle, its guns ready, its crew determined. The Therine Collective was about to learn something new about humanity. They were about to learn that humans didn't calculate acceptable losses. They didn't weigh costs and benefits. When humans drew a line and said no further, they meant it with every fiber of their being. The battle for Valorum Station had begun. The Indomitable tore through the outer perimeter like a hammer through glass. Explosions lit up the darkness as Therine patrol ships tried and failed to stop the advancing human warship. On the bridge, Lieutenant Hana called out targets while her fingers danced across the tactical console. Enemy cruiser at Mark 7, distance 4,000 kilometers, she said. It's charging weapons. Hit it before it fires, Captain Daewon ordered. The railguns fired again. The Therine cruiser's shields held for exactly 2 seconds before the metal slugs punched through. The ship broke apart, pieces spinning away into space. The Therine had good shields and strong armor, but they had never fought weapons like these before. Their technology was designed to stop energy beams and plasma bolts, not solid metal moving faster than bullets. In the fighter bay, Pilot Jay was already in his cockpit, running through the pre-flight checks. He was 28 years old, cocky, and one of the best pilots in the human fleet. His fighter was small and fast, built for speed and maneuverability. Around him, 11 other pilots were doing the same thing, preparing their own fighters for launch. All fighters, this is Flight Leader, Jay said over the radio. We're going to clear a path through their defensive line. Stay tight, watch your wingman, and don't do anything stupid. He grinned. Except for the things I tell you to do. Those are fine. One of the other pilots, a young man named Dongwoo, laughed nervously. Are we really doing this? There must be 100 enemy ships out there. 143, actually, Jay replied cheerfully. I counted. Don't worry, we only need to kill about 20 of them. The Indomitable can handle the rest. The launch bay doors opened and space appeared beyond them. Stars twinkled in the distance, but closer, much closer, were the enemy ships. Jay could see their engines glowing, see their weapons turning toward the Indomitable. All fighters, launch, ordered Commander Jiwoo from the bridge. Jay pushed his throttle forward and shot out into space. The other 11 fighters followed, forming up behind him in a tight formation. Immediately, enemy fire began to fill the space around them. Blue plasma bolts streaked past, each one hot enough to melt steel. Break and attack, Jay called out. Make them chase you. The formation split apart, each fighter heading in a different direction. The Therine ships tried to track them, but the human fighters were too fast, too agile. Jay dove under a destroyer, fired his missiles at its engines, and pulled up hard as the ship exploded behind him. That's one, he said, banking left to avoid incoming fire. Who's next? On the bridge of the Indomitable, Ensign Kyung was listening to dozens of radio channels at once. Therine communications filled her headset. Most of it encrypted, but some of it was clear enough to understand. Captain, she said, her voice excited. I'm picking up Therine command frequencies. They're confused. They keep asking what kind of ship we are, what kind of weapons we're using. Daewon raised an eyebrow. What are they saying exactly? Kyung listened for a moment, then translated. They're calling us the metal throwers. They don't understand how our railguns work. One of their commanders is asking if we're using some kind of forbidden technology. Hana laughed without humor. Forbidden technology. We're throwing metal at them very fast. Humans have been doing that for thousands of years. The Indomitable shook as enemy fire hit its shields. The lights flickered, but the systems held. Chief Engineer Minho's voice came over the intercom, calm despite the chaos. Shields at 70%, Captain. Port armor took some damage, but nothing critical. We can take a lot more of this. Good, Day-One replied, because we're about to take a lot more. Jiwoo, bring us around. I want a clear shot at that command carrier. The command carrier was huge, 3 times the size of the Indomitable. It sat in the center of the Tharine formation, directing the battle. Destroying it would throw the enemy fleet into confusion. Commander Jiwoo plotted the course. We'll have to go through their main battle line. At least 30 ships will have clear shots at us. Then we go fast, Day-One said. Minho, give me everything the engines have. Down in engineering, Minho smiled. Captain wants speed? I'll give him speed. He adjusted the reactor output, pushing it higher than the safety limits recommended. The Indomitable wasn't just a warship. It was a human warship, built to take punishment and keep fighting. Reactor at 120%. We're good to go. The ship accelerated, charging directly at the enemy formation. Tharine ships opened fire from all sides. Plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams converged on the Indomitable. The shields flared bright as they absorbed hit after hit. Alarm sirens wailed throughout the ship. Shields at 40%, reported Hana, her voice tight. 30%, 20. Hold course, Day-One ordered. In the medical bay, Dr. Suman was preparing for casualties. She was a small woman with steady hands and a calm demeanor that never seemed to crack, no matter how bad things got. Her team was ready, beds prepared, medical equipment charged and waiting. We're about to have a lot of injured people, she told her staff. Stay focused, work fast, save everyone you can. A young medical assistant looked nervous. Doctor, what if we can't save them all? Suman looked at him with kind but firm eyes. Then we try harder. That's what we do. The Indomitable broke through the enemy line. Ships exploded on either side as the railguns fired continuously. The command carrier was directly ahead now, its massive bulk filling the view screen. All forward guns fire, Day-One commanded. Every railgun on the front of the ship fired at once. The command carrier's shields held for a moment, then collapsed. Dozens of metal slugs slammed into the hull, tearing through armor plating and ripping into the ship's interior. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface. Target destroyed, Hana reported, disbelief in her voice. The command carrier is gone. Across the Tharine fleet, confusion spread like wildfire. Ships broke formation. Commanders shouted contradictory orders, and the coordinated assault began to fall apart. They had never lost a command carrier before. They had never faced an enemy like this. Jay and his fighters took advantage of the chaos. They swept through the disorganized enemy ships, destroying escorts and bombers. 3 human fighters were damaged, but none were destroyed. The Tharine pilots couldn't match their skill or their determination. This is Flight Leader, Jay called out, breathing hard. Enemy formation is broken. They're starting to retreat. On the bridge, Kyung was listening to the Tharine channels again. Captain, they're calling for reinforcements. They're saying they're facing a species that fights like demons. They've never seen anything like us. Day-One allowed himself a small smile. Tell Valorum Station we're coming. Tell them to prepare for evacuation. The battle wasn't over. The Indomitable was damaged. The shields were weak, and there were still dozens of enemy ships in the area. But the human warship had done the impossible. It had broken through the Tharine blockade. It had proven that one ship, crewed by determined humans, could stand against an entire fleet. Far away, watching through long-range sensors, the coalition fleet sat in stunned silence. They had seen everything. They had seen the humans charge into a battle they should have lost. They had seen one ship do what their entire fleet couldn't, and they began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had given up too soon. The Indomitable continued forward, guns still firing, engines still burning, crew still fighting. Ahead lay Valorum Station, and 12,000 people who desperately needed help. Behind lay the wreckage of dozens of enemy ships, and the beginning of a legend that would spread across the galaxy. Humanity had arrived at the battle, and humanity did not know how to quit. Valorum Station hung in space like a wounded bird. Its shields flickered weakly, failing in sections and then struggling back to life. Fires burned in exposed compartments, visible through broken windows. The Indomitable approached slowly, its own damage evident. Scorch marks covered the hull, and one of the main engine pods was dark and silent. "Station is hailing us," said Ensign Kyung, relief clear in her voice. "They can't believe we're actually here." Captain Daewon leaned forward in his chair. "Tell them we're beginning evacuation procedures. They need to get everyone to the docking bays. We don't have much time." On the lower decks, Master Sergeant Borum was already preparing her Marines for action. She was a hard woman, scarred from a dozen battles with eyes that had seen too much death. But she had never left a person behind, and she wasn't about to start now. "Listen up," she told her team of 40 Marines. "We're going over to that station. Some sections are still under fire from enemy ships. Some sections have lost atmosphere. We're going in anyway, and we're bringing every single person back. I don't care if we have to carry them one by one. Nobody gets left behind. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant," came the unified response. The Marines loaded into boarding shuttles. Each shuttle could carry 50 people on the way back, but right now they only held 10 Marines each. They would need to make multiple trips, many trips, and all while the Thaurine were still attacking. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Minho was dealing with a crisis of his own. The reactor had been pushed far beyond its normal limits during the battle. Now it was running hot, too hot, and the cooling systems couldn't keep up. "Sir, the reactor temperature is at critical levels," reported one of his technicians, a young man named Seojin. "If we don't shut it down, it could melt through the containment." Minho studied the readings, his mind racing through calculations. "We can't shut it down. If we lose power now, the shields fail completely. The Thaurine will tear us apart. But sir, I know the risks." Minho began rerouting power systems, redirecting coolant flow, adjusting magnetic containment fields. It was like juggling knives while riding a bicycle. One mistake and everyone died. "We're going to run this reactor at 180%. It shouldn't be possible, but we're going to do it anyway." Seojin looked at him like he was crazy. 180%? "The manual says—" "I wrote the manual," Minho interrupted. "And I'm telling you we can do this. Human engineering isn't like alien engineering. We build things tough. We build things that can take abuse. Now help me or get out of my way." On the bridge, Commander Jiwoo was tracking enemy movements. The Thaurine fleet was regrouping. They had called for reinforcements, and those reinforcements were arriving. A massive ship was approaching, larger than anything they had seen before. "Captain," she said quietly, "we have a problem. That's a Thaurine flagship. Their commander must be aboard." Daewon looked at the display. The flagship was enormous, bristling with weapons. "Identification?" Lieutenant Hana checked her database. "Ship designation translates to Devouring Silence. Commander is Thalrix, one of their most experienced leaders. He's never lost a battle." "There's a first time for everything," Daewon said, but his voice was tense. He knew they couldn't fight that ship. Not in their current condition. They needed to complete the evacuation and get out. Fast. Civilian advisor Taeyang entered the bridge. He was an older man, formerly a diplomat before he joined the military as a strategic consultant. He had spent years studying alien cultures, learning how they thought, how they fought. "Captain, I need to tell you something about the Thaurine," Taeyang said. "I've been analyzing their communications, their tactics. They're confused by us, genuinely confused." "Explain," Daewon ordered. Taeyang pulled up data on his tablet. "The Thaurine fight wars mathematically. They calculate costs and benefits. When losses exceed gains, they retreat. That's logical. That's smart. But we don't do that. We fight harder when we're losing. We push forward when logic says to pull back." "To them this makes no sense," Hana frowned. "So they think we're stupid?" "No," Taeyang replied. "They think we're terrifying. An enemy that doesn't follow logic, that doesn't respond to intimidation. That gets more dangerous when wounded. In their entire history, they've never encountered anything like humanity." The first shuttle reached Valorum Station. Sergeant Borum led her team through the airlock into chaos. People were screaming, crying, trying to push toward the docking bay. Some were injured. Some were carrying children. All of them were terrified. "Make a path," Borum ordered her Marines. "Keep them organized. Women and children first, then injured, then everyone else. Move with purpose, people." The Marines formed a corridor guiding the civilians toward the shuttle. A man tried to push past a woman with a baby, and Borum grabbed him by the collar. "Get back in line," she said, her voice like iron. "Or I leave you here." The man got back in line. A young girl, maybe 6 years old, was crying for her mother. Borum picked her up. "Where's your mom, sweetheart?" "Section 7, the girl sobbed. "She was working when the attack started. We'll find her," Borum promised. "I guarantee it." She handed the girl to one of her Marines. "Get her on the shuttle, then come back for the next load." An explosion rocked the station. The Tharine were firing on the docking bay, trying to stop the evacuation. Borum spoke into her radio. "Captain, we need fire support. They're targeting the shuttles." On the Indomitable, Day 1 didn't hesitate. "Hana, target those Tharine ships. Make them pay attention to us instead of the station." The railguns fired, slamming into the nearest enemy vessel. It exploded in a shower of debris. The other Tharine ships immediately turned their attention back to the human warship. "Shields at 15%, Hana reported. "We can't take many more hits." "We don't need to take many more," Day 1 replied. "We just need to hold long enough for the evacuation." Meanwhile, Pilot Jay and his fighters were engaging Tharine bombers that were trying to attack the station. His fighter was low on ammunition, running on fumes, but he kept flying. One bomber got past him, heading straight for the docking bay where civilians were boarding. "Not on my watch," Jay muttered. He pushed his throttle to maximum and rammed the bomber. Both ships exploded, but Jay ejected at the last second. His pod tumbled through space before a rescue shuttle picked him up 5 minutes later. "You're insane," the shuttle pilot told him. Jay grinned, despite the burns on his face. "Yeah, but it worked." Back in engineering, Minho was performing miracles. The reactor was screaming. Temperature gauges were in the red zone and alarms were blaring constantly. But it was still running, still providing power, still keeping them alive. "Containment field is fluctuating," warned Seojin. "Compensate with secondary generators," Minho ordered, his hands flying across the controls. Sweat poured down his face. This was the most dangerous thing he had ever done, and he had done a lot of dangerous things. On Valorum Station, Sergeant Borum found the girl's mother in Section 7, trapped under debris. With the help of 2 Marines, she lifted the metal beam and pulled the woman free. Her leg was broken, but she was alive. "Your daughter is safe on the shuttle," Borum told her. "Let's get you there too." 6 hours passed. 6 hours of constant fighting, constant evacuating, constant danger. The shuttles made trip after trip, bringing more and more people to the Indomitable. The ship's corridors were packed with refugees. Dr. Suman and her team worked non-stop, treating injuries, calming fears, saving lives. Finally, the last shuttle arrived. The last civilian was aboard. 12,000 people, all safe, all alive. Station is empty," Borum reported. "Everyone is accounted for." Day 1 felt relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. The Tharine flagship was moving into position, and it was preparing to fire. They had done the impossible, saved everyone. But now they had to survive what came next. "All hands, brace for impact," he ordered. "This is going to hurt." The devouring silence opened fire, and space itself seemed to burn with the fury of its weapons. The first volley from the devouring silence hit like a hammer from God. The Indomitable shook violently, throwing people against walls and consoles. Sparks exploded from damaged systems. The lights went out for 3 seconds before emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red. "Shields are gone," Lieutenant Hana shouted over the alarms. "Hull breaches on decks 4, 7, and 9. Main engines are offline. We're dead in space." Captain Day 1 pulled himself back into his command chair. Blood ran down his forehead from where he had hit the console. "Damage report, everything." Commander Jiwoo's voice was strained. "Port railgun array destroyed. Starboard weapons at 40% capacity. Navigation is gone. Life support is failing in 6 sections. Captain, we can't fight that ship. We can't even run from it." On the view screen, the Tharine flagship loomed like a dark mountain. It was preparing for another volley. This one would finish them. A transmission came through, audio only. Ensign Kyung patched it through to the bridge speakers. The voice that emerged was deep and somehow resonant, speaking in broken English. "Human vessel. This is Commander Thalrix of the Tharine Collective. You have fought well. You have shown courage, but you are defeated. Power down your weapons and surrender. I will grant you the honor of survival. This is our way. This is civilized." The bridge was silent. Everyone looked at Captain Day 1, waiting for his response. The logical choice was obvious. They had saved the civilians. Their mission was complete. Surrendering made sense. They would live. They would go home eventually. Day 1 touched the communication button. "This is Captain Day 1 of the human warship Indomitable. I appreciate your offer, Commander, But I'm afraid I must decline. There was a long pause. Then Thalrix spoke again, and this time there was confusion in his voice. You refuse? But you cannot win. Your ship is crippled. You will die. Maybe, Day One agreed. But we will die fighting. That's the human way. Another pause, longer this time. This makes no sense. You have achieved your objective. The civilians are safe. Why throw away your lives for nothing? Day One smiled grimly. Because if we surrender now, we teach you that humans can be beaten. We teach you that we have limits. We don't want you to learn that lesson. We want you to learn a different one. And what lesson is that? That humanity does not surrender ever for any reason. That when humans draw a line and say no further, we would rather die than step back from it. The transmission ended. Thalrix was silent, processing this information. It made no tactical sense. It made no strategic sense. But then humans made no sense. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Hana was working frantically at her console. Captain, I have an idea. It's crazy, but all our ideas today have been crazy. Talk to me, Day One said. The station still has mining charges attached to its hull. Hundreds of them. High explosives meant for asteroid processing. If we could detonate them while the Therine ships are close. Jiwoo's eyes widened. We use the station as a bomb. But we'd need perfect timing and our navigation systems are destroyed. We do it manually, Hana said. I can calculate the trajectories. We just need someone to fire the charges at the right moment. Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Minho was fighting a losing battle. The reactor was cascading toward shutdown. Half his team was injured. The other half was exhausted. But they were still working. Sir, we can't maintain power much longer, said Seojin, his face pale. The containment fields are failing. Minho looked at the readings. It was true. They had maybe 20 minutes before everything went dark. But 20 minutes might be enough. Transfer all remaining power to the starboard weapons, Minho ordered. Everything. Life support, communications, sensors, everything. I want those railguns to have enough juice for one last shot. But sir, if we do that, we'll lose life support in most of the ship. People will suffocate, Minho met his eyes. Then we better make that shot count, hadn't we? In the medical bay, Dr. Suman was treating injured crew members while refugees huddled in the corridors. A young boy asked her if they were going to die. She smiled at him. Not if we can help it, sweetheart. We're very stubborn people. The devouring silence moved closer, confident in its victory, its weapons charged for the killing blow. Thalrix watched the human ship on his display, trying to understand. These creatures made no sense. They refused an honorable surrender. They chose death over survival. It was illogical. It was insane. It was terrifying. On the Indomitable, Jiwoo took control of the manual weapon systems. Without navigation, someone had to aim the railguns by hand using visual targeting. It was something that hadn't been done in centuries, a skill from the age of ancient warships on Earth's oceans. Captain, I'll need a skeleton crew at the weapon stations, she said, and someone will have to stay at the station to trigger the mining charges. I'll do it, said Ensign Kyung, her voice shaking but determined. I can remote link to the station systems from here. Hana ran calculations on her damaged console. The timing has to be perfect. If we're off by even 2 seconds, this won't work. Then we won't be off, Day One said simply. Across the ship, crew members volunteered to stay at their posts, knowing they might not survive. They could have retreated to the escape pods. They could have tried to save themselves. But not one person left their station. Not one person quit. Far away, the Coalition fleet was still watching. Their sensors showed the Indomitable dead in space, powerless against the Therine flagship. They saw the human ship had no chance. Some of the Coalition commanders felt shame. Others felt pity. But one of them, a Corthan admiral named Vex, felt something else. They're not running, he said quietly. They could flee in escape pods, but they're staying with their ship. His second officer nodded. The captain refuses to surrender even though they've saved the civilians. They fight for principle alone. Admiral Vex made a decision. Recall the fleet. We're going back, sir. You heard me. If those humans can face impossible odds for the sake of honor, then so can we. We abandoned them once. We won't do it again. The Coalition fleet turned and began accelerating back toward Valorum Station. They were still too far away to help, but they were coming. And their presence did not go unnoticed. On the bridge of the devouring silence, Thalrix received reports of the Coalition fleet's return. He paused, considering. The humans had inspired their former allies to return to battle. One crippled ship, one stubborn captain had changed the entire tactical situation. "Charge all weapons," he ordered. "Destroy that human ship before the coalition arrives." On the Indomitable, Kyung's fingers flew across her console. "I have control of the mining charges. Ready on your mark, Captain." Jiwoo sighted down the manual targeting system. "Target locked, one shot. One chance," Hana counted down. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2. "Fire," Daewon commanded. Everything happened at once. The starboard railguns fired their last rounds using every bit of remaining power. Kyung triggered the mining charges on Valorum Station. Hundreds of explosives detonated simultaneously, turning the abandoned station into a massive fragmentation bomb. The railgun slugs hit the devouring silence, just as the debris field from the station reached it. The combination was devastating. The flagship's shields collapsed under the railgun impact. Then thousands of pieces of jagged metal from the station ripped through its hull at high velocity. Secondary explosions rippled across the enemy ship. Its reactor went critical. The devouring silence exploded in a fireball that could be seen from the planet below. Thalorix died instantly, never understanding the creatures who had defeated him. The Tharine fleet, seeing their flagship destroyed and the coalition fleet returning, began to retreat. The battle was over. On the Indomitable, the crew could barely believe they were still alive. The ship was silent, powerless, drifting, but they had won. The Indomitable drifted through space, dark and silent. Inside, emergency lights cast weak shadows across corridors filled with exhausted people. Refugees from Valorum Station sat shoulder to shoulder with crew members, sharing water rations and medical supplies. Nobody spoke much. They were all too tired, too shocked by what they had survived. On the bridge, Captain Daewon sat in his command chair and stared at the viewscreen. Debris from the destroyed Tharine flagship floated past, glinting in the light of the distant star. He had killed thousands of enemy soldiers. He had destroyed their most powerful ship. He had disobeyed direct orders from command and risked his entire crew, and he had saved 12,000 innocent lives. "Captain," Ensign Kyung said softly, "the coalition fleet is approaching. They're sending shuttles to assist us." Daewon nodded slowly. "Good. We need all the help we can get." He looked around the damaged bridge. Lieutenant Hana was bandaged and limping. Commander Jiwoo had burns on her hands from the manual firing controls. Kyung herself had a cut across her cheek that someone had sealed with medical tape. But they were all alive. The coalition shuttles arrived over the next 2 hours, bringing emergency power generators, medical supplies, and engineering teams. The Korthan Admiral Vex came aboard personally. He was a tall being with 4 arms and scaled skin, a species known for their tactical brilliance. He found Daewon in the damaged bridge. "Captain," Vex said, his voice carrying multiple tones at once through his translator device, "I must apologize. We abandoned you. We deemed the battle unwinnable and retreated. We were wrong." Daewon stood to meet him, wincing from his injuries. "You came back. That's what matters." "We came back because you showed us what courage truly means," Vex replied. "One ship against an entire fleet. Logic said you should die, but humans, it seems, do not listen to logic." "We listen to it," Daewon said with a tired smile. "We just don't let it make all our decisions." Deep in the engineering section, Chief Engineer Minho was supervising repairs with the help of coalition technicians. The reactor was stable now, running at minimal power, but it would need weeks of work to return to full capacity. Seojin worked beside him, exhausted but determined. "Sir," Seojin said, "the coalition engineers are amazed. They say no reactor should have survived what we put ours through. They want to know how we did it." Minho shrugged. "Human engineering. We build things that can take a beating. Also, we're too stubborn to let things break when we need them." One of the alien technicians, a small being with 6 eyes, approached Minho cautiously. "Engineer, your reactor design is remarkable. You pushed it to 180% capacity. Our species would have considered this impossible. How did you know it would not explode?" Minho thought about that for a moment. "I didn't know, but I knew it might work, and that was better than giving up." He patted the reactor housing. "Sometimes you have to trust that the things you build are as tough as you are." In the medical bay, Dr. Suman was finally sitting down for the first time in 14 hours. Her staff was still working, treating crew and refugees, but the worst of the emergency was over. Most injuries were not life-threatening. They had been lucky. Incredibly lucky. A young mother approached her, holding the 6-year-old girl that Sergeant Borum had saved. The woman's leg was in a cast, but she was walking with the help of crutches. "Doctor," the woman said, tears in her eyes, "I wanted to thank you. Thank all of you. You came for us when everyone else had given up. Why? Why would you risk so much for people you don't even know?" Suman smiled gently. "Because someone needed help. That's enough reason for humans." The little girl handed Suman a piece of paper. On it was a crayon drawing of a spaceship. Above it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Thank you, heroes." Suman felt her own eyes grow wet. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Pilot Jay was in the pilot's rec room, his face covered in burn salve, telling the story of how he had rammed the enemy bomber. The other pilots listened with a mixture of awe and amusement. "And then," Jay said, gesturing dramatically, "I ejected at the last second, did a flip in space, and landed perfectly in the rescue shuttle." One of the other pilots, Dongwu, laughed. "You did not do a flip. I saw the rescue footage. You were tumbling like a piece of garbage." "Details," Jay replied with a grin. "The important part is I stopped that bomber. And I looked cool doing it." "You looked like you were about to vomit." "Cool vomiting." Sergeant Borum found them there and shook her head. "You pilots are all insane." But she was smiling. Her Marines were scattered throughout the ship, helping organize the refugees, distributing supplies, keeping order. They were exhausted, but they kept working. That's what Marines did. 4 days later, a fleet of human ships arrived from Earth. They brought repair vessels, supply ships, and a command cruiser carrying Admiral Park, the head of human fleet operations. He came aboard the Indomitable with a grim expression. Captain Daewon met him in the conference room, along with Jiwoo, Hana, and Minho. He knew what was coming. He had disobeyed orders. Protocol demanded a court-martial. His career was over. Admiral Park sat down and looked at each of them in turn. "Captain Daewon, you ignored a direct order from command. You endangered your ship and crew. You acted with complete disregard for proper procedure." "Yes, sir," Daewon replied calmly. "And in doing so," the Admiral continued, "you saved 12,000 lives, destroyed a major enemy vessel, broke a siege, and inspired an entire coalition fleet to rediscover their courage." He paused. "You've made my job very difficult, Captain, sir." Admiral Park allowed himself a small smile. "How am I supposed to court-martial a hero? The entire galaxy is talking about what you did. The coalition species are calling it the miracle of Valorum. The Therine Collective has requested a ceasefire and diplomatic talks. You've changed the entire political situation in this sector." Daewon blinked. I was just doing what needed to be done." "I know," the Admiral said. "That's what makes it remarkable. You didn't think about glory or politics or consequences. You saw people who needed help and you helped them." He stood up. "Effective immediately, you are promoted to Commodore. The Indomitable will become the flagship of a new combined human coalition defense fleet. Commander Jiwoo, you're promoted to captain and will receive command of one of our new cruisers. Lieutenant Hana, you'll be teaching our tactics to coalition forces. Chief Engineer Minho, you're receiving the Star of Merit for achieving the impossible with that reactor." They all stared at him in shock. Hana found her voice first. "Sir, we're being promoted? Not court-martialed?" "Command wanted to court-martial you," the Admiral admitted. "But I convinced them that humanity needs officers who will do the right thing, even when ordered not to, especially when ordered not to. The galaxy is watching us now. They want to see what kind of species we are. You showed them. You showed them that humans don't calculate acceptable losses. We don't abandon people. We don't surrender when things get difficult." 6 months passed. The Indomitable was fully repaired and upgraded, gleaming in the light of Earth's star. Around it floated ships from a dozen different species, all part of the new defense fleet. The coalition had learned something from the humans. Courage was contagious. On the bridge, Commodore Daewon watched as the fleet prepared for its first joint patrol. Beside him stood Captain Jiwoo, visiting before taking her own ship out. Hana was at the tactical station, training a young Korthan officer in human battle tactics. "How does it feel?" Jiwoo asked. "Being a legend," Daewon laughed softly. "Uncomfortable. I just did what needed to be done. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Jiwoo said seriously. "Not anyone. Humans would have. That's the point. That's what makes us different. A transmission came through from the Tharine Collective. Ensign Kyung patched it through. A Tharine diplomat appeared on the screen, speaking carefully in English. Commodore Daewon, on behalf of the Tharine Collective, I bring greetings. Our leadership wishes to establish peaceful relations with humanity. We have studied your species. We have learned about your history, your culture, your values. We understand now why you fight the way you do. And why is that? Daewon asked. Because to humans, some things are worth more than survival. Honor, loyalty, the lives of innocents. You would rather die than compromise these values. This makes you dangerous as enemies, but invaluable as allies. The diplomat paused. We hope to become your allies. Daewon considered this. The Tharine had tried to kill them, had tried to slaughter innocent civilians. But they were also offering peace. Real peace. And wasn't that worth taking a chance on? We accept your offer of friendship, Daewon said. But understand this, if you ever threaten innocence again, we will stop you. No matter the cost, the diplomat nodded. We understand. And that is precisely why we wish to be your friends rather than your enemies. The transmission ended. Jiwoo smiled. You just made peace with a species that's been waging war for centuries. How did you manage that? By showing them that some species can't be intimidated, Daewon replied. By teaching them that humanity draws lines and means them. He looked out at the fleet, at the ships from so many different worlds flying together. The galaxy is changing, and maybe we changed it a little bit. Down in engineering, Minho was training engineers from 3 different species.